Welcome back, everyone. Sorry it's been a few days since I made videos. Not here to talk about the time in between, just here to come back and revisit the times about when I first became aware of the scars on the surface of our home planet Earth. Today we're going to talk about the myth of two suns. And you can see right here in this picture, we got one sun over here, we got this sun over here, we got another sun over here on this mountain, but I think those are caused by the reflections on the camera that took this image. I don't think that's what the stories were referring to. I'm going to take you over to here. This is where we're at on our map. We're in the region of Taiwan, somewhere in Taiwan. I'm going to zoom out. This is where we're at in relation to the scars. But now, I was going back to the time when I first became aware of the scars, and I just wanted to go back and revisit the steps I took. So around January of 2019 is when things started to really make sense, and at that time, in that month, I came across this article in particular. It's an older article from the Thunderbolts project from 2013, and this talks about, I guess I was not aware of this prior to stumbling across this article, but I guess there's a lot of these myths or legends from around the world that talk about a tale when there's two suns or more suns, they say. Here's one from the area of Utah and Colorado, and I'm just gonna scroll through and go along. So someone awoke in great anger and speedily determined to go fight the sun god. After a long journey of many adventures, the hare god came to the brink of the earth. So here's this reoccurring pattern right here, is to go back and see the hare god. We'll talk more about the rabbit later. So there was a couple attempts. In these stories, there's always someone shooting an arrow at the face of one or more of these. It's one of the two suns gets an arrow shot at it. Sometimes they're shooting at all, but there's always an archer and there's always an arrow. Here it's a magical arrow that finally hits it. And in these stories, a lot of times whatever the second sun was, it cools off and it later becomes the moon. Not so much in that tale up here, but so this one's from Myanmar. Two suns. One came forth, the heat was so great that neither man nor beast could endure it. To remedy this, a man by the name of, I don't know how to pronounce that, and they always shoot an arrow in the face of one of the suns. And then it ceases to give light and it becomes the moon. In another reoccurring pattern, it always becomes the moon after it gets shot in the face with the arrow. But before that, it's a sun. It's referred to specifically as a sun. Why I'm going to talk more about that. This one is from Taiwan. That's why I was over here on this map going to Taiwan, and I just happened to stumble across this and see the two suns. But there's actually, pulled up another, this is the story from Taiwan, the legend of two suns. There's your archers and your arrows. Now, the moon we see today is a remnant of, see, it's the bigger sun that was shot down, and that becomes the moon. So, from the perspective of the inhabitants of Earth, the bigger sun would be whatever got closer. I'm imagining if the sun and the moon are relatively the same size in our sky, and one of them was bigger, but it later became the moon, then you could imagine that the bigger sun got a little bit too close to the Earth at some point in time, is how I take it. So you have this where, and now it's the cool moon. It was hot back then. The heat was unbearable. It dries everything up. Um, but some of these, they actually come and they explain. See, this one has more. We can talk more about those. The 7 suns, we'll definitely talk about that number right there, because 7 is a reoccurring pattern, only not necessarily to this story. There is one of these. See, some of these, yes, the moon seen today is a remnant, and the distinction of day and night has existed ever since. So this is kind of a reoccurring pattern. Is after the event that brought us the moon, we have this distinction of day and night ever since. This is a tale from Taiwan. So, but we have tales about that like a time before there was, well, basically we have stories about creation of day and night, and they don't always translate, but there is a logical answer. So there's all these stories, and now here it's always an arrow. In this article, I'm going to link the article, obviously. They take a shot to try and explain this myth, and they're saying some might consider bolides or meteorite impacts. Um, see, it's but the point is, there's always an archer. There's always an arrow. One of the suns becomes a moon, and typically the one is hot. Here they try and explain this like a long shot, he says it may be, but a compelling solution offered by plasma physicist Anthony Peratt is a hypothesis of an intense aurora which occurred globally in prehistoric times. And he's talking about Z pinches and developing columnar instabilities. I'm going to give you guys an idea of what that is. Now, I don't think this article was written at any point in time when they were aware of scars on the surface of our Earth in relative proportion to our moon at such this scale. And if there are anyone from the Thunderbolts project listening, I actually contacted them after seeing this article, and I think I was a little bit preemptive. I didn't understand everything. I got a little excited, and they did reach back to me, but I think there's more to this one than just a simple play it off as it was plasma, because distinctly in these stories, it turns to the moon god. It doesn't say that in this tale from Utah, but if they have the myth of the hair god, the moon is always attributed with that rabbit. The rabbit in the moon, it all goes back to, well, I don't know. It's just the same tales get told, and there's that reoccurring pattern. But looking at these scars, this is the relative proportion of the moon. The archer and the arrow, you can kind of see if you were to think of the Earth as a sphere. Let's do this. Let's go here. If you have intense fluctuations in one portion of the atmosphere, you got all these layers. But if the moon's coming into the atmosphere, for anyone looking up here, they might see a region, like a bow-shaped region, how we see rainbows in the sky, sort of. So you have these bows. If you're going to throw in an object to get past all these layers, see the moon's way up here, but if it were to get closer and closer and closer, there's going to be, it's coming in here, but there's also going to be an arch coming back down here. So that the way we're viewing this, if this layer gets excited as particles are being forced down from the moon, and there's an intense region right here where normally it's invisible, but now if the particles become excited in this region, then you might get emissions of visible light along the entire layer of the atmosphere, which causes, for any inhabitants of land, that might look like a bow or a giant bow. If there's a bolt of lightning that shoots out from here in some manner to reach contact with the moon, then that could be the arrow, possibly. But when this is the interesting part. So all these dark spots on the moon, they say, are ancient lava fields. And this pretty much occurs on the side of the moon that faces us primarily. It's predominant. But it also does kind of look like a yin and a yang. But aside from that, when you go back to the stories, and they're always talking about how the fierce heat and everything got burned up, and how this is being referred to as a sun, specifically what we now call our moon, though. But if you think of it, while it's burning up in our atmosphere, and you get an effect kind of like this, where one side closest is being partially excavated away, partially melted, due to the resistance. And now you look at this, and they're saying this is produced by ancient lava fields 3 to 4 billion years ago. Mind you, at some point in time, something had to smash into the earth and rip this out and turn it into the moon, according to their theories. So there's a lot that still has to take place. But again, they're saying that this used to be hot, essentially. Well, they look at this and they see evidence that at one point in time, this used to be what they refer to as volcanic. But if it's being melted as it's entering the Earth's atmosphere, it might be slightly volcanic. But to those people of Earth, it might have looked like a sun. And if that's one of the reoccurring themes, is it burns everything up, gets too close, there's a lot of destruction that goes on. It kind of starts to make sense, and it was falling in line with what I was originally seeing with this theory about throwing the Earth at the, or throwing the moon at the Earth. And if there's more suns, there could have been other things associated with whatever this body was. We'll talk about that in another video. I'm going to have to get to that because that's kind of funny. But the point is, this appears to have supporting evidence to some of the mythology. And it's not even just the mythology, it's what the physics was explaining to me might happen if something like that were to occur. So I don't know if it was as much of a plasma instability. There might have been intense plasma discharges that happened, but I think that distinct tail has something to it. And especially when you get into it, there's a lot behind these legends, and there's these reoccurring patterns, and you're finding it on not just one remote region over here. This is every place on the planet. This is one remote region right here, but you have stories about this coming from over here on the other side of the planet. And you gotta wonder, is there more to the stories? So I guess we'll talk more about this. I'm gonna get into what all this entails, and I'm gonna try and formulate my hypothesis a little bit better into a video at some point in time soon. In the meantime, process this, take it in. I will link this article because this is very interesting and there appears to be more to this story. So let's look into it. All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.